Article 11. Shall the town raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for the purchase of 3 skate park features? This is recommended by the Board of Selectmen with an estimated tax impact of not even 4 cents, it's 4/10 of a cent? Okay. It's moved. Did somebody second it?
Good.
Okay.
The skate park, which is actually here on the grounds, and if you look out there through the back window, you'll see right now it's empty. The equipment that was there had rotted and failed and was a safety hazard, so it was removed, I think this past spring, if I remember correctly. Right now, all it is an asphalt pad with a chain link fence around it. That equipment was donated some years ago. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact year it was. And Parks and Rec Commission, does not have it in their budget to replace it. So they brought forth an article to purchase 3 items, and I'm going to recognize Janine Lynch from Parks and Rec to speak more to this.
Janine Lynch, Park Chair. In the past few years, Park and Recreation has started working on improving the skate park, as Selectman John Van said. We definitely started by removing pieces as they were falling apart. They were wooden and they were rotting, loose screws becoming hazardous. And then the next step we took in this past year was to improve the fence. It had been climbing over to gain entrance. There's only one pedestrian entrance on one side, and they were climbing over the fence on the other end, so it was getting smashed down and becoming hazardous. We replaced the damaged areas of the fence and included a second pedestrian entrance, so it no longer needs to be climbed over. So the next logical step would to be add elements and features back into the skate park. We're excited to work with a company named Weare right in Concord, New Hampshire. They design features for places such as Cannon Mountain and other ski mountains in the area. And we sought their recommendations for a skate park. Many of the volunteers on the park commission are not skateboard enthusiasts, and they recommend 3 elements for our park: a flat rail, a manual pad, and an A-frame. They're conducive to learning for beginners, but also entertaining enough for intermediate and advanced users. They're basic staples of any modern skate park and are able to be used by skateboarders, scooters, and BMX riders. They'll be made of a composite skate light or ramp armor, which is denser than wood and not water permeable. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the Chair of the Finance Committee, Tom Downing.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Before I read this recommendation, I thought we should clarify. We began a practice last season, and when an article was very close or close to a tie on both sides, that we would read or present both sides, 4 and against the amendment, which is why you'll see 2 different opinions within our response. So the Weare Finance Committee is recommending this article by a vote of 5 to 4. Parks and Rec has identified features requiring replacement at the skate park in the center of town. A majority of the committee supported the article, noting limited resources in Parks and Rec operating budget, and the article's very small impact on taxes. The minority opinion of the committee supported replacing these features through alternative sourcing, such as local fundraising effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion?
Luke Drake, Duck Pond Road. A couple of observations. I'm not a skater myself. However, I have kids, and one of the feedbacks I get a lot from them is we don't offer a lot for kids to do in this town. There's no rec center, there's no place for them to get to, and I don't know about all you, but when I was that age and didn't have anything to do, I found stuff to do. It wasn't always the right stuff. So one, I think it's good to demonstrate to the folks that are younger that the town does consider them and will provide resources for them. This is something they like to do. And the second point was, if they're getting over the fence to get in there, they're using it. I mean, we're not talking about something that's not going to be used by folks. We're talking about something that, if they're here using that, number one, you know where they are. Number two, you can see them. And number three, they're not doing something else. And that doesn't mean to suggest that kids are going to get into trouble all the time. I'm just saying, as a community, one of the functions of the community is to provide for the folks who can't vote and who are out there, looking for recreation. We don't have a lot of that in town, as we've heard. So I support it. Thanks.
Kyle Parker, Old Francistown Road. Insurance, like liability, if a kid were to get hit there, is that covered in this through what we already have as insurance policies in the town? Or is there an additional cost?
I believe it's covered under our umbrella liability.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Flaherty, Sunrise Lane. Just out of curiosity, not really specifically addressing this, but is Parks and Recs prohibited from using donations for things like this? I'm just curious for future reference.
I'm going to
Like businesses, donations, things like that. I know they can fundraise, but
They could, the donations would have to be accepted by the selectmen, but yes, that would be fine.
okay. All right. I was just curious. Thank you.
other discussion. Yep.
When a business donates and it's received by the selectmen, does it still need to come to this body to spend it?
Can you do me one?
Oh, Bruce Fillmore.
There we go.
Wool
Thank
Grove.
you.
No, if the town has adopted the proper statute, the selectmen can accept and expend without coming to this body.
Okay.
I just feel
Pat?
that time and time again.
Now, your name, sir?
Yes, Tom Clow,
And are you speaking for yourself, Tom Clow, or?
speaking for myself,
Good enough.
125 Concord Stage Road. Time and again, it seems that requests by Parks and Rec get turned down. And I just think that the physical health of our children and our adults is an important aspect of the town. And I would support this. It is a small amount. We don't ask for fundraising for other things that are parts of our community and are a function that's controlled by a committee or a board. We go ahead and look at them as something in themselves. I just believe that although this is a small amount compared to the other budget, I think we should support it because, as I said, it's movement. It's part of the health of children and adults if they so desire to skateboard.
Thank you. Just one moment. Janine, I had seen, did you want to speak to it as yourself or for Parks? So I'm going to defer to Selectman Van, and then he can recognize you again if you.
If I could just make a quick statement. Mr. Flaherty had asked the question about fundraising. I just conferred with legal on this. If this article does go through and it fails at town vote, fundraising cannot happen this year for any parts over there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Janine Lynch, Park Chair. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I am under the assumption Park and Recreation is unable to fundraise themselves. And so we would be relying on the community, which this has been ongoing for a few years. Parks and Recs has reached out to the community, social media, all of their public meetings, agendas, inquiring on what people would like to see done about the skate park. No one has stepped forward. There has definitely been talk about, oh, we'll raise funds, we'll come together, we'll support this, we'll draw up plans, and it ends, and that's within the last 2 years. So we feel that we don't have any fundraising options for what we're looking to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brent Dickinson, Dill's Way. So, for a point of clarification, if it gets voted down, you cannot fundraise.
Correct.
The previous equipment was donated, correct?
Correct.
So if this is shot down, can the town or the Parks and Rec Committee accept a donation as they did before?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would think so. They could accept the equipment.
Great.
I think so.
The precedent was set prior to with the previous equipment.
Well, no. I mean, the issue is under no means no. If this body says no, the selectmen can't spend money on something.
Right, and they're prohibited
But
from fundraising. But
if it's donated, I think you might be able to accept that.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing none, it moves to the ballot as written. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration on Article 11? Looks like it. Okay. Article 12.
Madam Moderator,
Who's calling me?
over here.
Yes.
I'd like to request a 5-minute break so that we don't miss any of the conversation and can use the restrooms. Is that possible?
Let me just, you want to do that right now?
Well, it's not an emergency for me, but I'd like
I didn't know if we were talking about you or you're speaking on behalf of the body. Do you want me to?
No, I'm talking on behalf of the body, just so that we can use the facilities without missing the conversation that's coming up for warrants. And we've been going at it now for, pushing 3 hours.
My goal was to get to noon. And
You
so,
have a stronger bladder than most.
well, yeah. So my goal was to get to noon. If the body would like to overrule me on that, we can put it to a vote now. So knowing that I was going to try to get through this next one, who would like to take a 5-minute recess now? Who's interested in waiting till noon? We're hanging in. Thank you. Okay, Article 12. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 3195C to restrict 50% of recyclable revenues to expenditures for the purpose of transfer station equipment and capital projects? Such revenues and expenditures shall be accounted for in a special revenue fund to be known as the Transfer Station Recyclable Special Revenue Fund, separate from the general fund. Any surplus in said fund shall not be deemed part of the general fund accumulated surplus and shall be expended only after a vote by the legislative body to appropriate a specific amount from said fund for a specific purpose related to the purpose of the fund or source of revenue, recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
I move the article as read.
Okay.
I would defer to Director Knapp to speak on it.
All right, Benji, I'm moving all my stuff for you.
So, I've been trying to think for a few years how I could fund doing some upgrades at the transfer station without jeopardizing the every year equipment that I ask for, such as plow trucks and replacing equipment. We have some fairly large projects we need to do: indoor recycling facility, fix the facility that's there, rebuild of the compactors coming up the pike, and every year I have at least 2 large items, if not more, on the ballot, and you can only ask taxpayers for so many things. So I thought if we could save some of the recycling money and bank it until it comes time for one of those large expenses, that might ease the burden on the taxpayer. So we had a lot of discussion, how much to save, all of it, quarter of it, half of it, and this is kind of what we come up with. It changes every year because of the price of recycling. So this year, 2021, we received about almost 84,000 in recycling. 2019, we received about 53,000 in recycling, and that all had to do with markets, not with the amount that the public recycled. So, I don't know if there's any questions. Have I explained that good enough? Get out of your way.
Don't go too far. I recognize the chair of the Finance Committee. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Weare Finance Committee is recommending this article by a vote of 8-1. Currently, all revenues from recyclables at the transfer station go into the general fund. Approval of this article will allow 50% of those revenues to go into a special revenue fund, which can then be used to help fund future needs in equipment and facility upgrades. A similar fund has been effective for the fire department using ambulance revenues for equipment and apparatus needs. The committee supports this approach of targeting revenues to directly support the facility generating that revenue.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator. Just a point of clarification on this article, the voting body would be the agents to expend this. So even if there was money in that account, very similar to the fire rescue fund, the voters would have to approve any monetary that comes out of there. It would not be the selectmen that would be agents to expend this fund.
Okay, thank you. So this is open for discussion.
Frank Campana. I would like confirmation that I think I know the answer, but the revenues as they stand now from the transfer station, those are the revenues, the less anticipated revenues of the budget. Those revenues are applied to the budget, I believe. I thought so. Again, it wasn't a trick question. I just wanted to make sure. Well, I'll tell you, when I dispose of something, whether it's scrap steel, aluminum cans, whatever else the revenues are generated by, I kind of use the transfer station as a convenience to me. But I'm also doing that because the town is realizing revenues to offset a budget, an operating budget, which in turn benefits me. I understand the logic, and I can kind of agree with the philosophy of, if it's generating revenues, then maybe those revenues should be, subject to that department's spending. Fire department's exactly the prime example. But it's also a little bit tricky because when the fire department says zero tax impact to buy a $300,000 piece of equipment or whatever it is, it's not going to cost me anything. Well, it has cost me something, okay? Because that's money that has not come back to reduce my taxes because it's a special revenue fund. This would be the same thing, all right? And I think it's a slippery slope all the time when you see an article that says it doesn't cost you anything. Well, it does cost. It does cost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Clarence Gardner. I assume the recycling is the only revenue source that you have?
Yes, in my department.
You're right. Yeah, that's what I meant. Would it be reasonable, without micromanaging, even though we have to approve expenditures from this fund, apparently, you get revenue from some of your recycling, but some of the recycling you can't use, and I know it's said like glass is crushed and used in roads and things. Would it be reasonable to say that you would try to use this fund to promote recycling as opposed to other projects that you do?
Yes. It's going to be available to fund anything. That's the intention. But one of my biggest projects I want to do is build an indoor recycling facility. If you go to any, for a couple of reasons. One, to keep very expensive equipment under cover and out of the weather. And for two, to keep the employees at least out of the weather, even if it isn't, heated all that well. You go to any surrounding town that is a quarter of our size and they have an indoor recycling facility. And I don't have a set of plans drawn up for that, so I'm very careful about going too far into that. But there's equipment that we can purchase to put in that recycling facility that perhaps could increase the amount we recycle without increasing the labor force, the number of guys I need or guys or girls that I need up there. So These are all ideas, and the compactor where you guys throw your trash and everything, that's going to need rebuilt in the next few years. That building, although I am asking to put a little bit in the budget to give it a fresh coat of paint, it's going to need some repairs. So this was thought to, make savings account so we can start doing some of those projects. If you know that you're going to need a roof on your house next year, you usually kind of put it away and wait till you have the money before you call the roofing company to just come put the roof on. So that's the idea behind it, I guess.
Okay. Let me just say, if it's worked for these other departments, I'm in favor of that. And I don't actually know too much about what you do, but I hope that it does, the recycling has its priorities in addition to just the trash handling.
Yes,
Right,
yes,
thanks.
it does.
Brent Dickinson, Dells Way. I've got a couple questions I'd like to. What kind of numbers are you talking that you gain from the recycling yearly? Just spitballing.
So 2021, we received $83,839. 2020 was $43,811. I can tell you that was just because of the markets. We actually took in more pounds of recycling last year, but 2019 was 53,661, 2018 was 84,999, and 2017 was 83,795. So with the exception of 2020 and 2019, which are really terrible market years, and recycling is derived very strongly off the price of fuel. So I always kind of joke, I just assume my aluminum can be worth less if I don't have to pay $5 at the pump. But so 3 out of those 5 years we've been over 80,000. So we would be able to put away approximately 40. And starting is, this savings account, so to speak, it take a number of years to get the money built up. So I kind of wished I'd have done it a couple of years ago. I just choose my battles, that's all.
Okay, so that leads me to the second question: is why only 50% are you only asking for 50%? Where I know some transfer stations throughout the state, throughout the country, are pretty much self-sustainable when they do this. So why are you only asking for half?
That's a good question. We talked about that a lot. I just really want this to pass so I can start somewhere. I would really like to just kept it all. I just felt maybe to have a harder time flying with the public.
Next year. All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Hello, Kevin Cahill, Reservoir Drive. Benji, I think what I'm hearing from the previous two gentlemen is sort of how can you incorporate incentivizing the recycling program to fund these projects, which are all, is for any of us who visit the transfer station know are need to be done. So I'm in favor of this article with the caveat that we somehow or another actually make the recycling, which is mandatory, more obvious, more transparent. Other communities use clear bags. The current supervisor has no real way to tell if people are recycling. And the uptick is, we have more people living in town right now, right? They're not going off to work. We're generating more trash. We're hauling more out of here at our cost. So the more we recycle, the less we haul away. Net is a plus to you, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So as you go down that road, possibly you could be thinking of ways that we could, I guess, apply what is already there, mandatory recycling. So I would ask you to consider that. I'm in favor of this article.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Other discussion? Oh, Dick, you just cut off Ms. Drake, I think.
Pardon me?
I think you just cut off Ms. Drake as she was winding the curve, but...
Oh, sorry. I noticed there's no tax impact, and I know that this revenue is revenue that can be used to offset taxes. So why isn't there an estimated tax impact?
I think it's really hard to gauge with the differences in the previous years.
I know, it's estimated.
Because it was almost, between 21 and 20, that it was almost a 50% difference in revenue, so.
If you take a 3 or 5 year average, you come up with a number. And again, it's an estimated tax impact. There is a tax impact,
Yes.
whatever that number is based on 5-year average or 2-year average.
5-year average was about 70,000 a year.
So that would be, if 70,000 is the average, you're talking 35.
So 50% of that'd be about 35 is what I'd be asking to keep.
So that would be the tax impact. So can we put that on the warrant article? That's right. So maybe the Finance Committee could add that to there. Is that the only document that reflects what the tax impact is outside of this piece that ends today? Is there any other document that indicates what the tax impact will be on an article? Well, the town provides a report, right? Huh? Yeah, I'm just asking if the town could put it on their mailer that would indicate what the tax impact would be. Hello?
I'm recognizing Ricky. I think he's trying to turn on his microphone.
I'm thinking about it. And I'm going to ask town attorney, because there's no spending, how would you put an estimated tax impact on this? Would it have to be a negative amount, or I don't know exactly how we would phrase that to put it on as a estimated tax impact?
I don't know how you would phrase it to put it on as an estimated tax impact either, because normally for a tax impact, it's when you're spending money, not when you're not putting that money into as a revenue. So there may be a way to do it. It would be unusual, and I don't think there's a legal answer to that question.
Anything else, Mr. Butt? No. Good enough. I'm sorry, I hate to hold you up. So he asked the Finance Committee a question. Did you want to respond to that?
He asked a question. It sounded like a question, so I just looked for clarification, and I'll respond.
Okay. Mr. Butt, the chair of the Finance Committee is asking if you actually asked a question of the Finance Committee, and if you did, he will get up and respond to the question, but just wanted clarification of that.
Well, I'm assuming the Finance Committee is going to take its lead from the Board of Selectmen, which it seems to have done on all these articles. But I'm just wondering or asking if any document, supplemental information that's provided to the voters would indicate there's a potential tax impact to that article. However it's phrased, I don't know. But in effect, you're spending revenue. So that revenue is a cost to that.
Well, I think what you're asking Tom a question that he would have to defer to the council on anyway, and what she has said to you is that there isn't a phrasing that you could use to answer that question based on the standard that there's zero.
I understand there's no legal
Okay.
requirement to
Yep.
do it, but just for information, it would, I think it would be beneficial.
Well, and I would imagine, that the Finance Committee would be held to only being able to put things on a mailer that are factual, right? So they would be held to that same factual standard as the town would.
So the
and
town is not going to put it in the mailer?
I'm not answering that one way or
Oh,
another. I'm
sorry.
just saying if that's the recommendation of town council, then I would imagine, to your point, I think that the Finance Committee wouldn't put anything on there that wasn't factually accurate or legal. So, Mr. Chair, did you want to speak to it? Okay.
To answer Mr. Butt's question, this board has not discussed that yet, so I can't answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. What I would say at this time is, as a rule, we don't discuss revenues and make recommendations on revenues, and this falls into revenues. But I can tell you that as a committee, we'll have a discussion at our next meeting, which is planned for Wednesday. That's the best I can say for today.
Good enough, thank you. And finally,
Angela Drake, Duck Pond Road. Back to the former gentleman's comments about information and how do we increase recycling. There was a time, and this was a number of years back, when with the property tax came the recycling revenue, and that seemed to have an impact on when people got their bill, they saw how much they could save or impact their own personal bill. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like that again. It's worked in the past. That's all. Thank you.
thank you. Did you want to comment on that, Benji?
Yeah, any ideas anyone brings forth, I'd be happy to see what I can do. I kind of want to stick up for us a little bit. I think that would do a pretty good job of recycling, and we've done that over the years by making it easy for the public, I believe. You throw your paper in a big trailer, all your other stuff goes over the bin, and we take care of it later. There's some things we've stopped doing just because of lack of personnel. Anybody that goes up there regular kind of sees I've had a little bit of a revolving door, so I'm cautious. Plastic is the one thing I'm referring to. Cautious getting back into that until I have a stable crew up there, because if somebody leaves and I got one person doing the job, really should have 4 or 5 people. I'm not going to mention other towns, but there's towns around us that are open 3 days a week with 5 employees, and we run it with 2 full-timers and 13-hour part-time. So I think they do a pretty great job, but there's always room for improvement for sure.
Liz Evans, 84 Oak Hill. My statements are with regards to the economic impacts of recycling and the potential revenues that could be generated over the longer term. That could not only help to sustain asset prices and home values to reduce the potential risk of bringing a landfill into town, that could then have a negative impact on home values. And also when we look at the overall economic and climate effects of recycling, most revenues that are sold in markets based on plastics and metals and paper, those are things that are, again, based on the mandated recycling order that we have in town, are mandatory. So if we can recycle to increase the revenue to reduce our tax, then perhaps these are activities that we can all take to try to reduce the tax rate. But further, my actual question is, what is the amount of revenue that has been generated based on the mandatory recycling order as it's been incepted, or since inception, rather?
Since the beginning, I have no idea. It was a long time ago. But the last 5 years, we've averaged $70,000 a year.
And that's $70,000 from the MRO, from fines that have been...
Recycling.
Okay.
Everything that we market.
And so my understanding is the mandatory recycling order is the perhaps fine that's imposed to local residents that do not recycle?
I don't know if there's ever really been a fine. We just strongly encourage you to try to recycle what you can. That's why we try to make it easy. Try not to be Nazis. We try not to, you hear the dump Nazi term all the time, right? So you try not to be that person. So we try to make it easy for you, and I think that's it. The best recycling rate you're ever going to get is pay as you throw, and I don't want to run a transfer station that you pay as you throw. So for a more or less a voluntary, we call it mandatory, but it's more or less we just encourage you guys to recycle. We have just about as high a recycle rate as any town around us. I go to NRA meetings and stuff and listen to other towns and how they do things, and I haven't seen one get us beat yet in our practices. And I think it's because we're consistent in how we do things, and everybody likes things easy. So.
Thank you. But could you impose, I guess, in terms of, when I think about mandatory and when I think about an order generally that has some sort of consequence or implementation, and so is that a fine, a revenue? How do you?
I think we're kind of getting outside the scope of what we're discussing today, which is this warrant article for this specific purpose. And I, as much as I appreciate your passion on this topic, I think that's probably a discussion for another day.
Great. And just my last question is, do your plans for the changes and renovations for the transfer station include a commercial composting facility?
I guess I don't really know what you mean. We have to discuss that. We compost now, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dickinson.
Brent Dickinson, Dell's Way. If I could disagree with a mandate on the recycling to increase recycling for the purposes
That's
of...
not on the table at the moment, so I don't think we have to devolve into that discussion. I think we got to keep it to the warrant article.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Any other discussion about Article 12? Seeing none, we are moving it to the ballot as written. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? And I want to point out to you, thank you very much, but I want to point out to you that I am dead on for noon. So why don't we take a 15-minute recess? Thank you very much.